Hello designers! In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a 4-page magazine spread on Adobe InDesign. Here you can see an example I created several years ago around the theme of art. You guys will be creating a magazine spread based on the theme I'm offering to you in class. You'll see that as I flip forward, I'll see pages 4 and 5, or 3 or 4, depending on how you want to look at it, of the magazine spread. And in these pages, you guys are going to see uniform components, such as this line that goes along the edge of the pages. You guys will see items like right over here where it says featured article with this line that gradually fades into the white of the paper. You guys will see uniform features like the drop shadow that you can see underneath the images, which I slightly regret right now, but that's besides the point. You guys will see uniform features like the subtitles that are all in pink that you can see throughout the magazine spread, and of course you guys will see uniform features in the text, such as the fact that the text is all broken up into 3 columns throughout. So this magazine spread should be fun and appealing to you, but it should have a sense of uniformity so that it makes it look professional and ready for print. I'm going to show you guys how to begin creating your magazine layout on InDesign, and then from there you guys will have the opportunity to individualize and to add content that's specific to your theme as provided to you in class. So let's get started. First things first, we're going to create a new file on InDesign. We're going to select the print preset, and we're going to select letter size from our blank document presets. I'm going to name this document magazine spread, and I'm going to make sure that facing pages is selected. I should have 4 pages in total in this document, and my starting page is going to be number 2. And the reason why I'm selecting number 2 as my starting page is because I don't want there to be a standalone page at the beginning. I'm going to scroll down and check out some of these other settings. I'm going to actually go and apply 2 columns to every page to try to keep my layout very symmetrical. And then if I want to play around with some of the bleed and slug settings, I'll do so later. But I'm going to click create now. Right now I'm in the Essentials workspace, and I actually want to switch over to Essentials Classic, which in my opinion is easier for me to access and just makes it easier for me to work with. And I'm going to toggle all of these panels over to my right hand side so I have a little bit more room to work on my document, and that just for me makes it easier. I'm going to make sure my pages panel is open because I have a lot of work to do on my 8-parent spread. So what I'm actually going to do is go and open up the sketch that I created earlier by going to File and Place, and I know that that sketch is stored in my Downloads panel. To make my life easier, I actually created a sketch to help me place some of the items within my spread. And this sketch was based on a layout from another magazine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and take some of the best ideas that I saw in this one magazine spread and try to use them while I'm creating content for my my own magazine spread. I'm just going to go and try to place it the best that I can. And ultimately, of course, the sketch is not going to show. You're just basically using it for a guide, and you don't need to worry about it looking grainy or anything like that. I'm actually going to open my layers panel, and I can see right now that that image was added as a sub layer in my layers panel. So what I'm going to actually do is lock it in place by clicking on this little box next to the eyeball icon, and this will enable me not to basically move it at all. So now that my sketch is locked, I can basically start going and making some of the frames that are going to be part of my initial layout, and I'm going to be using the sketch as a guide again. So I'm going to make sure I'm actually working on a separate layer, and I just clicked on the bottom of the layers panel where it says create new layer, and I made sure that all of that content was on its own, because again, initially I'm just using the sketch, but in the end it's not going to show, so I'm going to delete it later, and I don't want to delete everything in that layer accidentally. So I'm going to flip back to my pages panel, and the first thing that I'm actually going to do is work within the master page, or a parent as it's now called in InDesign 2022. And you know what? I'm actually going to go, and with this image selected, let me actually go back to the layers panel and unlock it for a minute, because I actually just want to lower its opacity. It's a little bit intense. Okay, there we go. So if you didn't see what I did, I went to Window and Effects, and I lowered the opacity of that sketch a little bit because I want it to serve as a guide, but I don't want to be distracted by it. So I lowered it to 50%, and I'm going to lock it again before I go back to my master page and I can start adding content. Okay, first things first, there's a few things that I need to make sure are on my master page, one of which is going to be my page numbers, and this is going to be crucially important. So I'm going to make sure that I go to the bottom of my left parent page or master page, and I'm going to drag out a little text box at the bottom corner, and this is basically where I'm going to be putting in my page number. So I'm gonna go to type, the type menu at the top. I'm gonna select insert special character and marker and current page number, and it's going to input a little A, but again, that A, as I told you guys before in class, is going to change once we go into the actual content pages, and it's going to reflect whatever page number we're on. So once I go and click in page number 2, you guys will see that the page number turned into a 2. Once we click on page number 4, it'll have turned into a 4. So the A is just, you know, temporary. And then I'm going to go and do so again on the right hand side. So I'm going to select my right facing master page. It's going to take me a really long time to call it a parent page. So forgive me if I keep going back and forth, but I'm going to just drag out that little text box, and again I'm going to the type menu and selecting insert special character, marker, and current page number, and I'm actually going to go and align this page number to the right just because I want it to be a little bit more uniform, and I think I'm just going to scooch it over to, let me zoom in so I can actually see what I'm doing. Always zoom in, you guys. Don't follow Miss Abaya's example, but I'm just going to go and scooch it over underneath the margin a little bit so that they are perfectly symmetrical and perfectly uniform. Good, so page numbers are complete. Now what I actually want to do is work on some of the recurring components, such as, in this case, the running head. And the running head is basically some kind of text that would say, for example, feature article, or maybe the name of the magazine, or anything that you would want viewers to see right at the top. So I'm just gonna go and make sure I'm on my master or parent page, and I'm gonna drag out a little text box, and in this case, instead of just running head, I'm gonna put in a feature article. I definitely don't want it to go and touch the borders of the document, so I'm gonna go and push that little text box down, and I'm just aligning it to the margins here. And having done so, I can now play around with some of the typography. I still don't know necessarily what fonts I'm going to be using or what colors or anything along those lines. So I'm just going to go and make it a little bigger by setting it to maybe 14 points, and I'm going to right click and select fitting and fit frame to content, and I'm going to double check by going to the page number 2, and you guys will see that now. That's because I created the feature article running head on the parent page or the master page. I should see it showing up on pages 2 and pages 3. In my example before, I had done these really pretty bars of color on the edges, and I think I'm going to try to replicate that here. So I'm going back to my master page, and I'm just going to go and drag out a rectangular frame, and I'm going to extend it from the edge of the document to those pink margins, and I'm gonna fill that frame with a color. Again, I haven't worked out my color palette yet, so I'm just now gonna go and maybe fill it with a placeholder pink, because as you guys know, I love pink. And to make my life easier, I'm just gonna go and hold down Alt and drag so I can make a duplicate of this bar, and I can place it over on the other side of my document. And now, because I did this on the master page, these bars are going to show up every time I go to pages 2, pages 3, and so forth. I am actually going to go back to my parent page or master page, and I'm going to shove a little folio that says feature article aside, or the running head aside, and now I'm going to work on the folio, and the folio will be showing at the bottom, and the folio is typically like the issue of the magazine that you are viewing. So for example, the issue would be the month and the year, because most magazines come out on a monthly basis. So I'm going to maybe include the month that you guys are doing this project, which at the time of this recording is December 2021, and that's what I'm going to use as my folio. And for the folio, I actually want to go ahead and place it all the way at the bottom here, and I am going to make sure that I'm on my right master page. You have to really make sure you're on the right pages here, so make sure your pages panel is always open. And I'm going to drag out a little text box and align it with the pink margins, and this one is just going to say December 2021. So I don't know when you guys are doing this tutorial, make sure you guys kind of align it to whenever you guys are doing this project with me. And then all the way here on the left hand side, I might want to go and include maybe the name of the magazine. So I'm going to make my life easy by just holding down Alt, and I'm going to drag that layer over, and this time I'm going to write the name of the magazine. So I'm making up a fictional name called Arts and Crafts. Maybe I'll call it Kids Arts and Crafts, because I know for sure there's no magazine called that, at least at this time. And later on, I will be going in and aligning all of the text and using the same character style so that it looks really uniform. But for now, again, I'm basically just working on the recurring components. So I did the folio, I did the date. I'm just making sure here that they are perfectly aligned, because you guys know Miss Abaya is very picky about these things. And later on, I'm going to go in and make some character styles so that I can make them all look really, really uniform. Okay, so for now that it looks uniform, I have my running head, I have my folio, I have my page numbers, and I have these bars on the margins that I want to see in every part of the spread. I'm going to start going in and working on my actual content pages. So I'm no longer working on the master or parent page anymore. I'm going to go into page number 2, and you might think, yes, woman, I understand. But I'm emphasizing this because you guys don't know how many times my students will make the mistake of they'll do everything within the master page, and they're like, oh, I don't understand why I'm seeing this on every single page in the spread. So you have to be careful. So basically, this is where I'm going to be using the sketch to trace out some frames to create my initial layout. So I'm going to go in and drag out a frame where my title is going to be. Again, I'm trying to copy this sketch as closely as possible, and this is where my kicker will be. So again, trying to copy that. This is where my main image will be, and I know I'm going to put captions at the bottom of that main image. So right now you guys are basically just going and dragging out a bunch of frames to help you position those things once you're ready to go in and add the text, add the images, and all the good stuff to make up your magazine spread. And now I'm going to flip on over to page number 3 in my layout. This one's a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to try doing my best here to try to simplify it. So this here will be an image. You know what, to make my life easier, I'm just going to go and drag it into one large block and split it in half using that gridify method that I taught you guys. And I'll do the same for this side as well. You can always convert these frames later when it is time for you to put in the actual content of your designs. Okay, so I just went in and I traced most of the sketch faithfully. Some changes did take place because I wanted to simplify it for myself. So I don't need the sketch anymore. I'm going to make sure I have it next to me on my desktop so I can reference it. But for now, I don't necessarily need to be staring at it on my document to distract me. So this is where I'm going to go in to my layer 1, and I'm gonna look for that sketch that I saved earlier. Okay, there we go. I had to make sure that I went and I clicked on my master or parent page first before I went to my layers panel, and I see now that the sketch is unlocked because I just clicked the little lock icon. So now I can just go and delete it because I don't need it anymore. And now when I go back to page 2, here's what my layout looks like thus far. So I have a place where my title is gonna go, where my intro will go, where my main image, a little bit of text, and some areas that I gridified. And if they're not perfectly aligned to the margins, you can just go and adjust those things now. So I wanna make sure that these frames are perfectly aligned to the margins, so I make sure I selected them by holding down Shift so that I can do them all simultaneously. And I'm just going and aligning all these things to the margins to make it look really, really symmetrical and really clean. To continue where I left off, I will now be placing images and text inside of my spread so far, and I had kind of formulated this idea that I would do like a feature article on an artist for Kids Arts and Craft magazine. So all the images that I'm going to use have to do with art. However, you guys are not going to use random images. You guys, of course, are going to use images pertaining to the theme I gave you in class. So I already located all of my images and I placed them in a folder on my desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna click on each frame one by one, and I'm gonna hit Control D on my keyboard, and that shortcut will let me open up images on my desktop. And I'm just gonna slowly but surely start filling in the spread using these images. I will actually be able to fill in more images inside of each frame by selecting each frame using Shift, so that I'm selecting multiple frames simultaneously. Then I can click Control D and I can start selecting multiple images to fill it with. Did you know your teacher actually painted these herself? Yes, she did. Your teacher is a very talented lady. Make sure you tell her so. Now, I should have cropped some of these beforehand. but what I'm gonna do is, because I didn't crop any of them beforehand, I didn't really apply any effects. If I go and double click on the image inside of the frame, I should get like a red bounding box around the image. So if I drag on the corners, I'll be able to just go and move the actual images around and focus on other areas, so that I'm not necessarily seeing any of the borders that I didn't want people to see inside the images. And right now I'm not all that interested in the fact that some of the images are clearly cropped, because I'm mostly worried about, you know, completing this spread. Okay, cool. So I already filled in quite a lot of the spread, so now I'm envisioning that next to the images in the spread there would be text explaining how the images correlate to, you know, whatever the topic of the article is. So I actually went and I made this block right here into two distinct blocks of text, or just two distinct frames, but I'm gonna go and delete one frame and make it a little bit longer so that would function kind of like a very long block of text. And I don't really have any specific topic that I'm gonna write about, so I'm just gonna go and use the type menu, and I'm gonna select insert or fill with placeholder text. In fact, I need to go and enable the type tool and click inside the frame so that then I can go and fill it with placeholder text. And I'm gonna do that also to some of the other frames here. I'm gonna select the type tool and click inside the frame, and then go to the type menu and select fill with placeholder text. And gradually I'll start building up some of the content in the spread. I think what I'll do is I'm going to save this frame right here, and I'm going to make this a pull-out quote. And a pull-out quote is basically like, for example, something the artist who made these amazing paintings might say. Or for example, if you were doing like an article on a musician, maybe like some quote the musician said or something like that. So that's what I'm actually going to do. I'm going to make that pretty distinctly like a pull-out quote. And right now I don't have anything in mind, so I'm just going to make something up out of the top of my head. Okay, so I'm done writing the quote. Now I know that I want to make it look distinct from the rest of the text. So one of the ways that I'm going to make it distinct is basically making it bigger. And I might want to go, for example, and center it. And just kind of play around with some of the way that the words are distributed so it looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing to me. And I'm going to leave it as is for the time being. Like later on, I'm going to play around with the font that I'm using. I'm going to play around with the color. For right now, I'm just interested in building up more content in the spread. Here, in these top frames that I have yet to include any information on, I'm going to be basically putting in the name of the article, and I'm going to be putting in a short intro that would guide the reader into knowing a little bit more about the article itself. So again, I'm making stuff up, but hopefully you guys have a little bit of a plan for how you guys want to populate the information in your magazine spreads. Okay, so I added in the title, and again, I'm going to be playing around with the font and the color momentarily. I'm just more interested in building up some of the content so that the spread doesn't look so like empty. So now I'm gonna go and make up an intro, which in this case, again, I'm just gonna rely on placeholder text because I have no idea what to write. So you guys can rely on placeholder text all you want, just to make the intro distinctive from the rest of the body copy, or what would be the actual like article that people would read. You would want to go and maybe increase the size of the text itself. You would obviously change the color to make it distinctive. So you know what, I'll go ahead and change the color to maybe like a blue, so that it's distinctive from the rest of the text, and then I can go and edit that a little bit further. I can see that some of my text is overset here, so I'm just gonna go and delete the remainder of it. And you know what? Let's make it easier on myself. Cool. So that is how it looks so far. So I have several of the things that I am asking you guys for. I have clearly the recurring components, like where it says feature article, the page numbers, the folio and date. I have a pull quote. I have images that are in an obvious gridded format, and I have body copy. And you know what? I've been looking at this like big block of text, and it's a little bit hard for me to look at because it's just so big and blocky. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to split it up into 2 columns. And if you want to do this as well, you just have to go to the object menu and you select text frame options. I'm just going to wait for that to load, and then once it loads, you can go and increase. In fact, let me click on preview so I can see the changes as I'm doing them. And let me increase the number of columns to 2, and you can see how it broke down that big block of text into 2 columns, which just looks better. It doesn't look like so overwhelming. And I can see as I did that, there's an error in my pre-flight panel because some of the text is overset. But again, I'm not really that worried about it because it's just placeholder text. So if some of it is, you know, broken off, then who cares? It's not actually saying anything important. And now I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with creating a drop cap to start off what would be the article. So let me zoom in here so I can see what I'm doing. And I guess the first letter would be the N from NUS. In fact, I'm actually going to go and just replace that to the, so that, I don't know, just makes it easier for me to identify. And I'm going to highlight that first word, and I'm in my control bar with the type tool selected. I'm going to look for my drop cap options, and I'm going to increase my drop cap to about 4 points because I want it to be pretty dramatic. So now that T and the is very, very distinctive. If I wanted the whole word the to be distinctive, I could go and increase the number of letters that are being drop capped, but I think that looks a little bit overwhelming, so I'm just gonna leave it at 1, which is the giant T. And I'm gonna go and zoom out and see what it looks like thus far. So really, if you guys notice, the most time-intensive part of this project is just setting up the layout. And once you guys have set up the layout, it actually looks pretty decent. And once you start putting in some of the content that you have planned to populate it. I'm going to click W to look at my work in preview mode thus far, and I gotta say that looks pretty professional. There are a few changes that I want to make, but I'm going to take it a little bit at a time, and I'm going to pause the video so that I can reflect on some of the changes that I want to make forthcoming. And I'm back. So I was looking over this while it was in preview mode, and I realized that I really need to start making the text distinctive. So what that means is making the titles distinctive from the body copy, making the pull quote stand out, and so forth. So one of the things that I thought about doing with the pull quote, and I'm just going to make sure that page is selected, third page here, is just italicizing it so it would read more as, an actual quote that somebody said. So right now I have it set to Minion Pro, and I don't believe they have an italicized option, but if I look in the applications bar here with the type tool selected, I do have the option to go and italicize any block of text. So it's called a skew false italic because it's not really italicizing it. You're just kind of like going and skewing the text to make it look like it's italicized. So that right there works for me. I think it makes it look different, so I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm not going to overdo it. I do want to go and make the title stand out. So I think I'm going to go and look to see through my font selector if there is something here that reminds me of art or just makes it look distinctive. And I think this font is fun and it definitely reminds me of the content. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make this frame a little bigger so that I have the ability to resize that title and make it look a little bigger and make it stand out more, basically. Okay, not bad so far. Remember, you guys have to go and click on W so that you guys can preview your work so far. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on some subheadings. So presumably there would be subheadings to break up the article, and I think I'm going to go and start adding them here onto my second, or in this case third page. And I'm going to get out of preview mode by clicking W again, and I'm going to click on the T to add a little bit more text, and I'm gonna write in some kind of subheading. So this one might be like the artist's process, or whatever you want to come up with. So right now the subheading doesn't really stand out from the rest of the text. So what I gotta do to make it stand out is I actually have to go and maybe make it a different color, maybe make it a little bigger, but I'm actually going to opt to add a little bit of shading. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to zoom in so you guys can see what I'm doing. And one of the subheadings is called the artist process. And with the type tool selected, I'm just going to go and flip over to the paragraph formatting controls, and I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to select shading. So there has to be like a little checkbox where it says shading, and select the shading color to maybe a blue. And you guys will see that now that whole block of text here that I highlighted was now shaded in blue. I'm also gonna go and, you know, maybe bold it or make it a little bigger. I'm just gonna go and try to make it a little bit more distinctive, you know, so that it stands out from the rest of the text. And I think to just go and add a little bit of interest, I'm going to go and maybe add a second subheading here. And then maybe this one will be called, gosh, I don't know, acrylic versus marker. And I'm going to apply the same exact settings to it. So I'm going to add a little bit of that blue shading, and I'm gonna go and make it a little bigger. I believe I had set it to 14 points. And yeah, let me zoom out here so I can see the work in full. And remember, you guys have to click away from your type tool so that when you guys click W, you're not like typing in random W's into your document. You're just like looking at it in preview mode. And so far I gotta say that looks pretty good. I'm liking it so far. So I'm gonna start making a few minor changes to just go and add a little bit more visual interest. I think I might want to go, for example, and use the same text that I was using here in the title, this really whimsical text on the pull quote. I think I maybe want to apply it to the drop cap and just play around with it a little more. Okay, not bad. I made some minor stylistic changes, and I think it really starts pulling in the work together. I think the last thing I'm going to do before I end my video will actually be to play around with the section called feature article, because I think what I want to do is add some of this shading to that as well. And you guys will recall that I did that recurrent feature using the parent or master page, so I have to go back to that page in order to edit it further. And I think what I'm gonna do is highlight it, and then I'm gonna add a little bit more of that shading that I was using on the, there we go, that I was using on the subheadings, and maybe extend it. You can see how I'm extending the frame so that it goes past the actual width of the text, and it goes past the pages. And I'm just gonna see what that looks like before I commit to it. And yeah, I think I like that, but I'm not sure. I mean, I think I'm gonna have to live with it and check out my spread a few times before I commit to it 100%. But yeah, you can see how that is looking really, really professional, and it's definitely a big improvement from what we started off with. So now this is where you guys can go and move to pages 4 and 5 of your spread. And you might be thinking, well, Miss Abaya, we sure spent a lot of time working on pages 2 and 3. Are you going to show us how to do pages 4 and 5? And that's where I tell you, nope, you're on your own. You guys have been given the tools. I've shown you how to do it. So you start with your sketch, then you start copying the sketch to the best of your ability by dragging out frames to create your layout. And then once you have a pretty nice layout, you can start populating it with text and images. And of course, you can start editing the text and images to reflect your own stylistic needs. But then you're pretty much on your own building the rest of it, you guys. And I know you guys are going to make me proud to create a magazine spread that is truly editorial and professional looking. So repeat some of the steps that I demonstrated earlier and you guys should be okay. Hit me up if you have any questions. I really, absolutely cannot wait to see your work. So, peace out.